friends and family. Thank you for joining my channel, the channel that's dedicated to adult social work in the UK. If this is your first time stopping by, I'd like to welcome you and thank you. If you are a social worker working in adult social care, or you're thinking of becoming a social worker in adults, then you will need to be familiar with the term strengths-based approach in social work. So what is strengths-based social work? This is what today's video will be addressing. So the key word here is strength. It is about focusing on the individual as a master of their situation and allowing them to take ownership of their situation. So, just to help you to understand this better, as social workers, our job is to assess people. And when we assess, that's when we're able to determine what assistance or support, if any, the person may require. When you go out and visit clients in their homes and you're assessing them, it needs to be strengths-based. So do not focus on the individual as being helpless or needy, but rather focus on the individual as a person who has some strengths, skills, and is also capable. Look at the individual. Look at the person's individual strengths and what they can do for themselves, rather than focusing only on what they can't do for themselves. Are you with me? If you're completing an assessment or a Care Act assessment, or you're completing a review of a client's needs, you do not go in with the mindset that you're going to change their world and put in formal care for them. In other words, getting carers to do everything for them, because that would not be strengths-based social work. It's about your mindset and what you focus on as a social worker. When you're going out there to visit and assess the client, you need to have a focus. And the focus shouldn't be heavily led or heavily based on the person needs help. You've got to look at other factors as well. Okay, so just think about it and put yourself in the shoes, or put yourself in the position of the individual that you are assessing, or the client that you're working with. You need to bear in mind that, you may be assessing somebody who might have been independent all their life. They once had a career, for example. They were mobile. They were able to go out, get out and about. They enjoyed hobbies and interests. But suddenly they've become unwell. They might have suffered a stroke. They might have had a fall, which has triggered other health problems and difficulties for them. Very often, if somebody or someone has been independent all their lives, they would struggle to come to terms with their new situation or their diagnosis. Not being able to function as they once, did before, it would be difficult for anyone. So this is the very reason why you have to be sensitive in your approach and understanding of the person's needs. We must empower people so that they can in turn empower themselves. We don't need to make people feel as though they're helpless because of their situation. As social work practitioners, we have to look at how we can improve the person's quality of life. As social workers, with the resources that is available to us, and try to make life more meaningful for the individual that we are assessing and the individual that we are working with. We need to speak to the person, speak to the individual about what good life looks like. What does a good life look like to the individual that you are assessing? Speak to the client about any hobbies or interests that they enjoy, and if needed, we can support them to pursue their interests and their hobbies. It's not always about what help do you need in terms of carers, visiting and doing things for the person. It's also about trying to improve the person's quality of life and supporting them to pursue some of their hobbies and interests. Please note that sometimes people will only be able to recognize or identify their strengths and what they're good at, what they're capable of doing, as a result of how you approach them as a social worker. You know, your person-centered approach and your strengths-based approach is key. So, for example, we don't go out to assess people just for the sake of it. You know, as social workers, we assess people because there is a need to. Something has happened. We don't go out to assess when things are working perfectly. So the person that you're assessing may be struggling and they're not coping very well and they need to be assessed or reviewed. So on that note, because the person might be in a crisis situation, it's very easy for a social worker to go in there and see the client as needing help, needing support, and that could easily be the focus of the visit and the assessment, and it shouldn't be. Your assessment shouldn't only be based on the person needing help and what support they need. We must also focus on other areas such as the person's strengths. What is their interest and hobbies? What is important to the person that you're assessing? You must bring out the best in the person and find out what is important to them. Your role as a social worker is to provide the client with all the possible options and then enable them to make an informed decision. Allow the individual to take charge of their situation because they know themselves better than you would. In adult social care, you will work with people who do not have capacity or who lack capacity to make certain decisions. For example, they may lack capacity around their care and support needs. Mental capacity assessments is another big area in adult social work, and we will look at mental capacity assessments in the very near future. There is no doubt that many people that come to our attention will need a care package. They will need a formal care package or formal care arrangements in place in order to support their day-to-day living activities, because their needs are so high or their needs are such that not providing care would place the person at risk, which we want to avoid. However, in doing so, you need to still focus on the individual's strengths as well. Strengths-based approach is about promoting well-being and independence. In doing so, we need to make use of reablement. We need to make use of rehabilitation and recovery models. Strengths-based approach is about exploring different equipments, for example, different types of occupational therapy equipments, to enable people to be as independent as possible in their homes. We also need to explore assisted technology to enable individuals to be safe at home. We will look at different types of equipment, such as OT equipment and assisted technology in a separate video. When you're completing your social work assessments and you're working with clients, do not be so heavily focused on what the person cannot do. You must also look at what they can do for themselves, and where there are gaps, we can help to bridge that gap where possible, provided they have eligible needs for support. Are you with me? So, you've been allocated to assess a client because there is some kind of need. There is a need. That's why you're there. That's why you're visiting the person, to assess them. Your assessment is to identify what the person's need is. So you need to go in with an open mind. And remember that people are experts in their own lives and their own situation. Be creative Strengths-based social work is about creativity, being creative. Understand and harness the strength of individuals and their support networks. So, does the person have friends and family? Do they have friends and family that can support them in an informal way? A good strengths-based assessment should aim to address the following. Number 1, what needs to change to make the person safe and for them to regain control of their life? Number 2, what input or support does the person require from adult social care in order for them to regain control of their life? Number 3, what does a good life look like? No doubt the person that you're assessing would want to be happy and live a fulfilling life. So you need to explore what that looks like for them. Number 4, what is the person's hopes and aspirations? You need to also explore what is important to them. As social workers, we want to go in with the mindset that we want to help people. We want to change things for the better. And that is correct. We do want to support and help people as best we can. But we've also got to remember that it's not always about putting in formal care packages, arranging for care workers to visit and support the person. Sometimes it's also about exploring basic equipments that the person can use at home in order to be able to manage their day-to-day living and be as independent as they possibly can. Strengths-based practice is also about giving people advice and information about what is available to them in their community and any local resources that they can tap into that they may not be aware of. Sometimes it can be little basic things like that that really matter to the person. So I've described in this video what strengths-based social work is. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have and you believe you've learned something today, please give me a thumbs up and comment in the comment section below. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Take care and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.